Since November, Missouri officials have tried to hide where they're getting their execution drugs. This redacted license was key in a St. Louis public radio investigation that revealed the state was resorting to an out-of-state pharmacy that wasn't licensed to sell in Missouri. Under normal circumstances, a pharmacy selling its drugs without a license in the state could be committing a felony. In his deposition shown here, a high-ranking corrections official testified that he was actually driving across state lines with more than $11,000 to pay the pharmacy, all in cash. This revelation led to a lawsuit in which that pharmacy agreed to not sell for at least one of Missouri's executions. That's when the state said they'd found another willing pharmacy. So far, little is known about this new supplier. It led a federal judge to declare that, based on the minimal information the state has provided, it could be that Missouri is relying on nothing more than a high school chemistry class. The state has now carried out 2 executions, that of inmate Michael Taylor and Jeffrey Ferguson, since it's found its new supplier.
And I want to mention, too, we want your voice, your thoughts, your insights in tonight's conversation. So find us with hashtag StayTunedSTL. Okay, Chris, so we're talking a lot about injection drugs. And I guess, too, I just want to set up that these are kind of separate issues. I mean, I've seen you there covering this. There are very emotional issues. We're going to hear more from the county prosecutor later. Mm-hmm. We're going to debate different issues. But specifically, your reporting has been, is it fair to say, more about the way the state does its business?
My reporting has mostly been about the state's actions. It's looking at it more from sort of a macro level, saying the state's, obviously drastically increased the number of people that it's been executing, the rate that it's been doing it, and looking at, the lengths that it goes to, specifically in obtaining the drug, which has been a problem for not only Missouri, but a lot of other states.
Okay, let's start there then. Why is that? Why has it been hard for Missouri to get its hands on this one single drug, which is?
Pentobarbital. The problem is that virtually no drug manufacturer wants its products to be used in lethal injection, either for moral reasons or for public relations reasons. As a result of that, you have a lot of states, or at least several of them that are carrying out the death penalty still, turning to things called compounding pharmacies. Compounding pharmacies aren't like drug manufacturers. They aren't regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. They're instead regulated by state boards of pharmacy. And the drugs that they make have a significantly higher failure rate, which is problematic because obviously the drug has to be of a certain quality if you're going to use it to carry out an execution, or it could go wrong.
You want it to work.
Right.
And there's no way to test it, I guess.
And the quality of the drug really varies from batch to batch. And many would argue that it's very contingent upon the identity of the supplier.
You want to know who's supplying it because they have a track record?
If they have a track record of making shoddy products, or if they maybe aren't licensed. And in fact, as we mentioned earlier, we had an investigation at the end of December where we found out that Missouri's drug supplier was not licensed in the state of Missouri.
But before we get into that, I want to know, the state has its reasons for not wanting you to know, or anyone to know, where they're getting these drugs.
Well, the state contends that if the identity of the supplier were to get out, that the supplier wouldn't want to sell for executions. It's why states go to such great lengths to keep them secret. It's why a high-ranking corrections official is, driving to Oklahoma, or was driving to Oklahoma with $11,000 in cash.
To buy the drugs.
To buy the drugs. So there are a few different reasons. I mean, one, the state says that it's unpopular for this supplier to get out, if their identity were to get out. And the other reason, they cite safety concerns. But
the same reason that the curtains are pulled, as Bill is describing, and you don't see who's carrying things out in the room.
Right. And Missouri does have statute that protects the members of the execution team who are directly carrying out the execution. The state expanded that definition in October to try to include the people who are supplying it. That's something that's very much contentious and not at all settled in the courts right now.
Okay, so you still found out who we believe was supplying this. What did you find out?
So, yeah, we were able to find out ultimately because the Department of Corrections made a mistake. They gave out more documents. They didn't redact everything that they should have. We found out that the supplier was an Oklahoma compounding pharmacy that wasn't licensed in the state of Missouri. We also found out that this pharmacy had been cited in the past for increasing the dosages of drugs, ordering pharmacists to shred the prescriptions. We had also found out that they had been cited in the past for creating a copy of an FDA-approved drug, which compounding pharmacies are not supposed to do, and there's a law against it. So there were some problems with this pharmacy. We reported their identity, and then a few weeks later, an inmate who was on death row sued that pharmacy. They went to court, but they reached a settlement that was out of court. So we ultimately don't know the exact terms of that settlement.
So are they still supplying? This has been out there prior to yesterday's
Sure.
execution.
So in February, they reached a settlement, the terms of which were confidential. But from everything that I've been told, they agreed to not sell for that specific inmate's execution. Nothing I've read seems to indicate that they've agreed to not sell for any of Missouri's future executions or executions or for other states, for that matter.
So Missouri's had to go elsewhere.
Yes, in February, the state said that they'd found another willing pharmacy. And ultimately, at this point, we don't know anything about this pharmacy. I've asked several times to see the license, to no avail.
Okay, there are a few other elements to this in terms of objections people are raising. There is the idea that while the appeals process, we've seen this play out in the last few executions, goes through the Supreme Court, there are somehow other appeals still perhaps undecided when the person is put to death.
Sure. So the state completely changed its execution protocol on the drugs that it was carrying out in October. So there's still a trial for the constitutionality of that method that is supposed to take place in September. So let's say I'm an inmate who's set to be executed. I would file an appeal with a district court and the federal courts. Let's say that stay is accepted, saying the method of your execution would likely be unconstitutional. At that point, the state would appeal to the circuit court. Let's say the circuit court disagrees and says that no, this execution wouldn't be unconstitutional. At that point, I would appeal to a higher court, but Missouri's shown the ability to carry out an execution before another court has weighed in and actually made that vote.
And a judge, at least one we know of, has taken issue with this. We have a clip I want to play. Can you very briefly set up what we're about to hear?
So this is Judge Riley. He's the head of the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is obviously a high court, and he's speaking to an assistant attorney general, talking about their practice of carrying out executions while appeals are still pending.
And he knows the recorders are rolling, just to be clear.
He does.
And he says the following.
I might just tell you this, I'll probably regret saying this later, but I think it was the execution of Nicholson, but the state of Missouri executed somebody, which they probably had the right to do, right in the middle of our petition for rehearing voting. And I just want you to take back the word that some of the members of the court did not appreciate that we were right in the middle of voting on that.
I understand.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good tape, as they said long before you were recording interviews, I'm sure. Where are we going next? What are you working on next? Where do you see this going?
Well, the state of Missouri seems like it's going to be continuing on with its pace of about one execution per month. We're still very much in the process of investigating this new pharmacy and this new supplier to see if it's licensed in the state of Missouri and if it has any citations in the past. A lot of this really depends on what the courts ultimately say about the constitutionality of the state wanting to keep secret the identity of the supplier, though.
Thank you for your...